For the roasted vegetable tart, you need to start with roasting your vegetables. So we need pepper, onion and tomatoes, and I'm going to cook the quiche in this dish. So actually I think a quarter of a pepper is going to be plenty. So I'm just going to take the seeds out of that pepper, and this needs to be chopped into chunks. We don't want everything that's roasted to be really soft and soggy. On the other hand, we don't want it to be too hard and crunchy. So cutting them into chunks like that will be fine. Pop those into the bowl. I just need half an onion. I'm just going to cut an onion in half, and please remember, as you can see, I'm getting all the rubbish off my board, and then because I've cut it in half I can just peel the skin away quite easily. Don't like the look of that layer either, it's got a little mark on it, so I'm just going to take another layer off the onion. One more layer. And then because I'm at home, I have a separate board for onions and garlic. I'm going to take both ends off. I'm only going to take a tiny bit off that end because I want to hold this together. And I'm just going to cut this into wedges or chunks. So there we go, and that can go straight into my bowl as well. And the tomatoes, because I don't want them to burst in the oven, it's entirely up to you. You can either cut them in half, but I've got 4 tomatoes here, and I'm just going to make a little cross in the top. I'm going to leave them whole, make a little cross in the top just to prevent them from bursting in the oven as they cook. In the bowl already, I've put a tablespoon of oil, so there's a tablespoon of oil at the bottom of this bowl, and it is just there to, don't want to roast the vegetables raw. And I'm going to add a little bit of thyme. I've just been out into the garden to get this bit of thyme, so I'm going to put a few fresh herbs in here. As these are fresh herbs, you don't need quite as much as you would if they were dried. It's entirely up to you which herbs you would like to use. I'm using thyme because I like thyme, but you could use mixed herbs if you didn't want to. You don't have to put any herbs in with your vegetables. And if you were making a larger quiche, you could put a wider range of vegetables in here. This is quite a small quiche, and I don't want to have too many vegetables for the dish. But you could chop up courgette, aubergine, mushrooms, and I'm just going to stir these around, make sure that they are coated in oil, pop them on a baking tray and put them in the oven to roast. While the vegetables are cooking in the oven for 10 minutes, I'm going to make a start on the pastry. I have 150 grams of plain flour in my bowl and a total of 75 grams of fats. I've got 40 grams of butter or margarine and 35 grams of white vegetable fat. And the reason that I'm using 2 different types of fat is the white vegetable fat will make the pastry nice and short. This is short crust pastry, which means crumbly, and the butter or margarine helps to give colour and flavour. So rub the fat into the flour with your fingertips. Try and only use your fingertips because the palms of your hands are hotter than your fingertips. Lift the mixture up a little bit. Let it fall back into the bowl. You can turn the bowl using the back of your hands if you wish to, and you just keep going until your mixture looks like breadcrumbs. Just remember to keep moving it around your bowl. When you think your pastry is done, you can shake your bowl and large lumps will come to the top. And if you just make sure that that is not large lumps of fat, which it isn't, it's where the mixture is starting to stick together, you can add your water. The water is 1 5ml teaspoon of water for every 25 grams of flour. So I have 150 grams of flour. I need 6 teaspoons of water in here. So 6 teaspoons is the same as 2 tablespoons, and I'm just going to stir that up. Cold water, give it a stir, and you should see the mixture starting to form into a dough. Now, I can see that bits of this are starting to form. It doesn't look quite as doughy as I would like it, so I'm going to put my hands in and start squeezing it together. And when you do that, you need to start using your own judgment to decide whether or not you need more water in this pastry. But if you put too much in when it's cooked, your pastry can be hard. If you don't put enough in, your pastry will be hard and difficult to roll, but that's fine. The 6 teaspoons of water is plenty, and I have a ball of dough and a nice clean bowl. Okay, the pastry's in one ball, and all that needs to happen now is that I can roll this out while the vegetables are still cooking. So hopefully when my vegetables are cooked, my pastry will be ready to go into the oven. So shape it to a ball first of all. Remember, roll once away from you, little turn to the pastry, once and away from you. And I do believe I've managed to get a bit of time in my pastry. So keep rolling once and away from you. So the way that you know if this is big enough for your dish, and I have an 18 centimetre sandwich tin to cook this in, is you put your dish on the top, and when you've got enough pastry around the outsides that you can see to go up to the top of your dish, you can stop. If you turn your pastry every time you roll it, it will never stick to your worktop, because as soon as you can feel that it is starting to stick, you can add a little bit more flour underneath or on top. So just a little bit more, and then this will be big enough for the tin. So there we go. That's big enough. You can pick your pastry up, spread your fingers underneath and put it into your tin if you like, or lots of people prefer to fold the pastry in half over the rolling pin and unroll it over the tin. When you've got your pastry in the tin, you can see, if I get it in the right place, there we go, you can see that it's sloping here. What's really important is that you lift your pastry into the tin. You don't just press that down, you've got to lift your pastry around the edges. As you roll pastry, you stretch it, and we need to give it a chance to relax, not stretch it anymore. So the pastry is there. This needs to be trimmed, so using the back of a knife, trim your pastry. So you can just cut down against the edge of the tin, go all the way around. There we go. Don't need that, and then you can make a nice edge to your pastry. So this pastry is going to be baked blind, which means it's going to be baked without a filling in. That is one way to help you avoid having a soggy bottom to the pastry. If we bake it blind first, before we put the egg and milk mix in, we can be sure that the pastry across the bottom is cooked. So to bake this blind, I'm just going to make a few holes in the pastry with a fork, not going all the way through and around the edges. If you were to put this in the oven with nothing inside it, your pastry edges would collapse, because the first thing that will happen is that the fat in the pastry will melt and it won't be able to support itself. So we have to support the edges of the pastry to stop them falling in, so we can get the filling in the pie. At school you can do this with greaseproof paper, which you just scrunch into the bottom of your dish, and then you put some baking beans in to keep it flat. At home, I don't have greaseproof paper, so I tend to use foil and scrunch some foil up to the edge of the pastry to hold the edge of the pastry up. This needs to go into a hot oven, so fan 200, gas mark 6, and I would give it 10 minutes to start with and then check. And after 10 minutes, what you're looking for is to see that the pastry around the edge here is started to cook and brown. And once it's started to cook, it will hold itself up, and you can then remove the foil and see if it needs any longer cooking. I'm going to pop this onto a baking tray before it goes into the oven. Okay, the vegetables are roasted, the tomatoes are definitely cooked, and I have some nice brown on the onions and the peppers. So I'm just going to leave those to one side to cool while I finish making the rest of the quiche and sorting out the quiche for the rest of the fillings. The pastry's had 10 minutes in the oven, and if I move the foil out of the way, you can see hopefully that it is starting to brown around the edges, and if I touch the edges they feel quite dry, but in the middle here I can see that the bottom of the pastry has not been cooked yet. So I'm just going to pop it back into the oven, same temperature, for another 5 to 10 minutes until the pastry on the bottom of the dish is completely cooked. The pastry is now cooked. You can see we've got a nice golden brown edge, and it is ready to have the filling put in. So the filling, to make the filling, I have 125 mils of milk in my jug. I've just put just crushed some black pepper on the top of it because I like black pepper, and then I'm going to add an egg. And it's much easier if you measure your milk first into the jug that you are going to use, and then add your egg to it. If you add the egg first, you're trying to work out how much milk you've actually put in. And I just like to break the egg and milk up a little bit first and then whisk. So whisk until the milk has gone a little bit yellow and it doesn't look white anymore. I've got 100 grams of grated cheese and my roasted vegetables. So the roasted vegetables I'm going to put into the pastry case first, and as I've got 4 tomatoes, I'm just going to put those in quarters. The onion and the pepper, I'm not really worried about where they go. I'm just going to tip those in, and then I can spread them out in a little bit if I want to. If you want to have your vegetables a little bit darker than that, if you want there to be a little more brown on them, what you would have to do is put them into the oven for 5 or 10 minutes first without adding the tomato, because the tomatoes are the ones that will cook the quickest. So roasted vegetables in there, and then a good layer of cheese on the top of that. If you want to be able to see your vegetables a bit more, put the cheese in first and put the roasted vegetables on top. So that's actually a bit too much cheese with all those vegetables, so I'm not going to use the whole 100 grams in there. And lastly, my egg and milk mixture. Now, because this pastry is already cooked, the pastry has shrunk a little bit away from the edge of the dish, so you need to carefully pour this on, keeping an eye on it and making sure that by the time you've finished adding all your egg and milk, it is not actually coming up above the edge of the pastry. So this is going back into an oven. My oven is turned down, it's now on 160 degrees, gas mark 4, because I don't want to scramble this egg and milk. And I'm going to leave it in there for 20 minutes and then check it. The quiche has been cooking for 20 minutes in my oven. The pastry is still brown, the cheese is melted and starting to brown, and it has a very slight wobble. It's not runny anymore in the middle. If I tip it, you can see it's not actually runny. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the egg and milk to be set, slight wobble, and your quiche is finished.